All right, well, thanks for everyone who's here. All right, I'm just gonna go through some of the lessons learned, as Mike just said, during our transition from in-person to virtual interviews, and hopefully get you guys some tips on how to, from the applicant standpoint, on how to make the virtual interview as good as possible, and then also from the program side as well. So, and I have no disclosures. So, I mean, why are we even talking about virtual interviews? Well, as Mike just said, you know, we, at least in our program, we had actually started our interviews in March of 2020 and had done our first set of interviews, and then of course the pandemic struck, social distancing, travel restrictions, et cetera, and so we had to finish off our season virtually, and then obviously last year we did everything virtually. So, you know, who knows? I'm not sure what's going to be for the upcoming years, but I think virtual interviews, virtual conferencing, virtual everything has really replaced a lot of what's been typically done in person, and you know, I think it's probably here to stay. So this is a paper that came out of actually Mike's group. This was a survey that was taken after the first round of virtual interviews with perspectives from applicants and also on the faculty. It also has some sort of tips for how to set up the actual virtual interview, and I'll just go over that briefly. So, I mean, I think this is probably, for those of you who participated in interviews, this is hopefully something similar to what you guys experience. So, you know, there's sort of this central hub where the applicants and the faculty, and usually the current fellow, can all sort of mingle together and speak. And then basically the beginning of the interview is sort of the orientation that typically would have been done in person. And then from there, everyone stays in that central hub, including the fellow, so that when applicants are coming in and out of that hub for their interviews, that gives an opportunity for the other applicants that are in there to be able to talk to each other, to network, to speak to the fellow without faculty being present, you know, maybe ask some questions that they might not feel comfortable asking of the faculty members. But then from that central hub, there are just breakout rooms that each candidate would go in and have their interview with their faculty. Then after that, it's followed by a sort of wrap-up session with everyone, and then there would be two separate breakout rooms, one for the, again, sort of follow-up with the applicants and the fellow, just to sort of have any last-minute questions and answers, and then usually what will happen is the faculty will go off into another session and then talk about the applicants and decide what everyone thought about it. So I think this is a pretty nice overall format for interviews. I think most interviews are probably conducted this way. You know, there might be some, you know, variations on it, but it seems to work actually very well. As far as if that's accepted or how applicants felt about it, how faculty felt about it, these are the results of the survey from Mike's group. So they had an 85% response rate of the candidates. And really everything, as you can see, was rated, you know, very highly. So 89 to 94% of the candidates felt like the interactions were easy. 53% felt that the virtual interview exceeded or met their expectations. 94% felt that they were satisfied with the experience, and 76% would recommend interviewing in the future this way. And then on the faculty side as well, pretty positive responses. So again, this is the first, you know, time around. Obviously, I think each iteration will continue to get better as people have become more sort of accepting that virtual interviews are probably the norm. I think these will become even, you know, higher. There's another paper that came out right after that paper. This is a tips and tricks. It was written by the group at the MGH. They've actually surveyed and looked at all of their surgical subspecialty interviews during the 2020 years and came up with sort of a format for how to sort of optimize the virtual interview experience. So basically, it was broken down to advice to applicants and advice to programs. Under the advice to applicants, they had three separate groups. So one was how do applicants optimize their physical environment? How do applicants conduct a technology trial run, and then how to cultivate habits of effective virtual interviews. So optimizing the physical environment just has to do with making sure that you have a quiet space, that you have a mic, you have headphones, you have, you know, a door that can lock so people don't walk in. I mean, these are all pretty sort of, you know, seemingly intuitive things, but honestly, not every person might have a physical environment that's conducive to a virtual interview. And so, if that was the case, one of the recommendations was that perhaps the applicant might go to the medical school or a faculty office or go to a location where they could have an optimal physical environment. Technology trial run, you want to make sure that your speaker works, you want to make sure that your mic works, you want to make sure that you sort of try it to make sure that there's no glitches, you want to wear the outfit that you're going to wear during your interview. One of the things that came up was that if you wear glasses, there can sometimes be a glare, and you should think about that and change the lighting so that that's not distracting to the person who's interviewing you. Even consider investing in getting a ring light to sort of make the lighting as optimal as possible. These are all little things that you might not think about, but really can make the actual interview day much more comfortable. And then as far as the habits during the virtual interviewing, again, you want to make sure that you have that you're wearing a suit, that you've shaved, that you're not gesticulating with your hands too much, that you have maybe some snacks ready on the side so that you can have an opportunity to grab something to eat when you're not physically on camera. Make sure to mute your microphone when you're not actually speaking. I mean, all these little things that you actually may not think about it, but if you went through the checklist that they provided here, it would really make for your interview day as smooth as possible. And then, of course, there's advice to programs. So before the interview day, making sure that the program sends out the schedule to the applicant so they know exactly what time they're going to be interviewing and that they can prepare for that ahead of time. There might be some pre-recorded materials that you might want to put on your website so that the applicant would have a chance to review those either before or after and be possibly as informed as possible about the program, or even in our case, we have this really great video about what living in Madison is like. So if someone's never been to Madison before, they could go on there, they could see a video of the seasons, the lakes, the snow, everything, sort of things to try to make people who don't have an opportunity to come in person and see the program, sort of feel excited about the physical location. Obviously, you might send information to the applicants, including email and contact information of the people that they're going to be interviewing with so that they have an opportunity to follow up with them afterwards if they have any other questions. And then there was a whole separate section about how to make sure that when you're conducting the interview that you're doing it in an equitable manner and that you're minimizing any bias, and I'll talk about that a little bit in just a few minutes. But again, these are things that you may not think about but really allow for a better experience on both sides. For those of you who may know Andy Wright, who's at the other UW, he actually published this commentary at JAX, but basically talking about how he actually thought that virtual interviews were very effective replacements for in-person interviews, and gave a whole slew of reasons why he thought so. So obviously cost considerations, so you don't have to travel, you don't have to take time away from work, you don't have to think about childcare if you're going to be out of town. For people who have limited resources, having to travel to a lot of different programs for interviews can be actually very disadvantageous, and that could, again, increase bias, as I just talked about. There's also environmental impact of travel and, global warming, less traveling, the better for the environment. And then for places that are, smaller programs, if there was, Andy's point was that if you had a combination of virtual plus in-person interviews, that might be very disadvantageous for programs that are smaller because, maybe all the applicants would just go to the, sort of high-profile programs in person, and that would allow smaller programs not to have as many qualified applicants apply. So, he really sort of advocated for, if you were going to do virtual interviews, to basically make it all virtual and not a mix of both. There was a pretty interesting response that was submitted by Haley and colleagues where, they sort of commented, well, we think that if you don't have an in-person interview, that really doesn't provide the applicant an opportunity to really see the place, to really feel like if they would fit in, to see what the culture of the place is, to see whether or not they think the overall environment is someplace that they would be willing to live. And the other thing that was brought up in this rebuttal, which I think actually came to be true, is that if you have a combination of in-person and virtual, I think really what happened in 2020 is that because it doesn't cost as much money, because you don't have to travel, because you don't have to take time off, a lot of applicants that were considered maybe higher tier applicants were interviewing at a lot more places than they normally would. And what was happening was that other sort of maybe, less, on paper, qualified applicants were not getting as many interviews because all the spots that typically were maybe, not being filled by the higher applicants were no longer available. And that definitely seemed to happen this year. And I think that is definitely a sort of a negative thing to think about. And I think Andy's then wrote a response to that, and one of his potential solutions to that would be something like limiting the amount of interviews that a program could actually offer to applicants, and I think that would be a great way to sort of minimize that as a problem. I just want to briefly talk about some of the issues that have been brought up in all of these concerns regarding biases that could occur when you're having in-person interviews. And this was, I think, a really nice piece, and it has this, I mean, I know this is very busy, and I sort of tried to highlight some of the things that sort of stuck out to me, but it came up with these two tables. One, where potential biases could exist when you're doing virtual interviews, and then sort of ways to potentially try to mitigate some of these biases. Again, I think these are definitely things to think about. So like, for example, let's say you have an applicant that doesn't have a great place to have their video, or let's say they don't have childcare and their kid walks into the room, screaming while you're in the middle of your interview. That could potentially create a bias where the interviewer might think that person's not, really interested in the program or is not committed to the program. So I think these, you can look through some of these examples here, but I think these are really thoughtfully lays out all the potential biases that can occur in virtual interviews, and then provides some sort of suggestions and strategies on how to try to minimize some of those biases. So it's worth your while to take a look at this, I think, and something to really think about as an interviewer when you're interviewing applicants, to really try to create an environment and a situation where you're really trying to minimize as much bias as possible. And then finally, there was one other paper that I thought was fairly interesting that sort of goes back to the sort of other unforeseen collateral damage, as they talk of virtual interviews, and that's sort of the networking aspect, right? I mean, I'm sure for those of you who interviewed for residencies or for other things, and you all remember going to social events where you would meet someone that was in your cohort, and then 10 years later, you still are friends with that person because it's someone that you had a chance to interact with early on. I mean, I personally still keep in touch with people that I met on my interview trail, and that you definitely lose that when you're doing virtual interviews and you don't have that opportunity. So it's something to think about. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, no matter which way you do it. This group came up with some suggestions with social messaging apps and virtual, social events, and I think those are definitely things that we should try to do. Again, none of this is perfect, but just as long as we're all aware of these different, downsides and potential advantages, I think that's the best that we can hope for. So basically, in conclusion, I think everyone at this point, you've probably been on enough Zoom conferences and enough Zoom interviews to really probably agree that it's definitely an acceptable alternative to in-person interviews. And in some instances, I think it actually can level the playing field for applicants. Really take a little extra time to think about ways to try to minimize any biases that might be occurring while you're doing your interviews, and then thinking about ways to utilize, as I said, some sort of social networking to provide opportunities for those peer networking. So thanks very much. Yeah,